Okay, I am back. I have not played this game in a year, have not played since 2019, have not been thinking about the game at all, and honestly, I did not expect that I would ever have any interest in playing Game of Thrones again. For a few reasons. Number one, the people that I had to play with in real life were quickly dwindling down to zero, even before the coronavirus pandemic thing. Obviously, now that that has come upon us, my game shop has been shuttered completely, and the opportunities I have to play in person are absolutely none. And I would not be surprised if I never am able to play Game of Thrones in person again, which is really sad, but that's just how it is. The only way that it could happen at this point, assuming we're ever allowed to see people in real life again, is if I'm willing to throw down hundreds of dollars on like a plane ticket to go fly out to some tournament somewhere. And that was something that it was never that appealing to me, even when the game had quote unquote more life in it, I guess, so to speak. Like when I was playing the game really actively, I was like, do I really want to do that? So it's not impossible, but that'll probably never happen. But the other thing that, well, so I guess there's two more reasons. One of was Fantasy Flight stopping all support for the game. It was like, oh, they're not going to update the restricted list ever again. They're not going to make any new cards. The last little pack that they put out, the things we do for love or whatever, was really disappointing because the cards were really imbalanced and are basically all illegal, which I completely agree with. And I understand that the point of that was they wanted to give people a lot of throwbacks to first edition and like all these nostalgia points. To me, I would have rather had cards that were playable and not stupid. And luckily, that's what we're going to get here. But that was depressing. That it felt like the game was going to be sort of dead and stale because of that. It was like what we have is what we're stuck with. And also, after Fantasy Flight stopped supporting the game, the players and the community wanted to keep supporting it, right? So they made this thing called the Conclave, and it's this on the AGOT Cards website, the Conclave. I don't know what the Conclave is. I don't know who's on it or what it does. And I saw a lot of really stupid drama about it on Facebook. There were people like, oh, the Conclave broke up because they're mad about politics and now they're back together again, and just all this nonsense that I did not care about. And it's like, I don't want to touch that with a 10-foot pole. So I don't know what the deal is there. Don't really care to know. But I will say that I absolutely love, whatever the design team is, which I guess is maybe some subset of the Conclave or something. Redesigns by the design team. Whoever the design team is, huge props to them. The fact that they exist and have done such great work has been done here has inspired me to start playing the game again when probably I wasn't going to otherwise. So this is absolutely amazing, these redesigns that they've made. What I was a proponent for is I would have liked to see all of these problem cards here just banned outright, like just get rid of them, problem solved, and then the game can be like more diverse and there won't be as much oppressive, stupid stuff, and we won't have to deal with a restricted list that's like 50 cards long. They went way above and beyond that. They literally changed all of the cards to make them more balanced. Like all of these overpowered cards, they all nerfed them or redesigned them to make them not as stupid. And, that way you don't have to take them out of the game. You're not removing like 50 cards from the card pool, basically. And you don't have to deal with a stupid, gigantic restricted list. Like it's the best of every world. Basically, it's the highest effort solution, and it's also the best solution. And it's something Fantasy Flight was never ever willing to do. Which, seeing this is also inspiring to me because it confirms like, oh wow, look, these random players in the community are doing a way better job with game design than Fantasy Flight ever did. So that confirms when Fantasy Flight was releasing a lot of these stupid cards, and I get frustrated like, why are they printing this? This seems broken. This seems imbalanced. What were they thinking, etc. It's like, yeah, actually they could have done better, and somebody did come along and do better. So I guess in a way, maybe it's not the worst thing ever that Fantasy Flight has dropped the game, because we definitely probably would not have gotten this type of support. Which again, in my opinion, I like this better than anything Fantasy Flight ever did, besides the fact that, Fantasy Flight just printed new cards for people to buy. This is great. But I'll try and stop gushing about it. I tried to record a video reviewing all these cards yesterday. It was epically long. It was way too long. It was like over an hour and a half. And there was a ton of horrible static feedback on the mic on the recording that was it was just unlistenable in a lot of parts of the video, and I'm hoping that doesn't happen on this recording. I don't understand where that came from or how that happened. I'm actually on a different computer, so maybe something to do with this new computer. It doesn't like OBS. I don't know. I literally had to fire up my old computer that I replaced this year because I forgot the email address to my YouTube account where I was uploading all these Thrones videos. And there's no way I was ever going to remember that email address if my old computer wasn't able to boot up where I had it, saved in my browser. Luckily, after sitting there on a knife's edge for about 20 minutes, the stupid thing finally let me log in and glance at YouTube to see what the email address was, and I was able to get back in. Anyways, oh man, what else is there for me to say about like state of the game and such? Well, the Iron Throne, when I've been looking on there, pretty consistently has a double-digit number of games, usually just low teens, but there are enough people playing that when I got on there, I could find people to play with and have games pretty quickly, and that's also reassuring. Obviously, this wouldn't matter if there was no one to play with, but there are at least enough people to play with for now, I think. It's like a bare minimum amount. Like if it decreased any more than the level it's at now, I would start getting worried, but hopefully it'll sustain where it is here. And they had like a online Red Saturday tournament, which I guess got a lot of interest. I certainly saw people talking about it, and hopefully stuff like that keeps people interested in the game. Anyways, let's go ahead and just try and run through all these redesigns. There's a ton of them. I'm not sure how many total, but it's like 6+ cards for every faction almost. Baratheon, obviously being Baratheon, probably has the lowest amount of redesigns. Let me count them for Baratheon here. Literally one card for Baratheon. Is it literally just Selyse? It might only be Selyse, but Greyjoy, it's like 7. Lannister, okay, Lannister only has 2. Yeah, Lannister's not known for having busted cards either, but Martell has, okay, 3. Maybe I lied when I said it was 8 for every faction, but there's definitely one of them that's 8. I remember that. Anyways, Selyse, they redesigned Selyse to only be usable once per round. She used to reduce the cost of every R'hllor attachment you play by 3. So if you're playing like Azor Ahai Reborn, I think it was called, is where like the character participates in every challenge with an attacking R'hllor. And as they point out in the comment, I don't know how you would pronounce this, Cohor R'hllor. Anyways, it was too stupid because if you could marshal 3 R'hllor attachments on the first turn, and it would be, she would be giving you more than 7 gold at that point. And it was just too much value. It was too fast, and there was no way for people to have time to respond to it. So that aspect of her has basically been nerfed, and she's obviously still a card that'll probably be 3 copies in any type of R'hllor attachment stack, but she's just not as broken as she was. As always, a common theme, why are things being printed without limits? She didn't have a limit, now she has a limit. She's more reasonable. Victarion, another card that is fixed by giving him a limit, or at least, addressed by giving him a limit. I should say that it's possible that some of these cards are still going to be too strong, and they're going to have to, like, tweak them more, redesign them again, who knows. But I think, it's good that they tried, and I think what they're trying to do here is definitely moving in the right direction. And ideally, all of the cards are a lot more playable now, and there won't be anywhere near as big of a restricted list ever again. Let's hope. But yeah, so the old version of this card, the amount of warships you had was the amount of times that you could stand him, which got really stupid really fast. It was not that hard to have 4 or 5 warships, and he was basically then a 7 strength character that just doesn't ever kneel to attack or defend for all intents and purposes. Even with limit twice per phase, I would expect he's still going to be in like every Greyjoy deck, except for, Drowned God maybe, and maybe even then you'll still play him. I don't know, because that's still really crazy good. If you think about Randyll Tarly, he's limit twice per phase, and he's still, a cornerstone Tyrell character, always has been, probably always will be. This guy is still on that level, and he can still get renown and kneel enemy locations on top of his standing. That part of it is still there. So still a really good card, but no longer infinite. Euron, first they changed his reaction. You can now either search your deck for silence and put it in your hand, or you can put a warship into play. So it used to be it would do both at once. It would search silence from out of your deck or discard or whatever, and it would go straight into play. So you paid 6 for him, but he's putting a 4 cost into play for free that you searched out of your deck, which was crazy value, even if he didn't have anything else besides that. But he also just had unconditional intimidate, and he did way too many things all at once. It was like impossible to respond to all of them. You would need like different cards to try and counter every one of the different things that he does, and so he was way too efficient with the card economy there. Now he's slower. You have to pick which one you're going to do, and they even made his intimidate conditional on having other raiders, and that's kind of a serious condition, I would say, because I did make a Greyjoy deck. I've made a few decks to test out again, and I was looking through the Greyjoy deck, and it was like, yeah, there's not any other raiders in this deck, like not even one besides Euron himself. That deck had the core set version of Euron, but like if you're just making generic good Greyjoy characters, there's actually not very many that are raiders. They tend to be pretty weak characters on their own. So that condition there does make a difference. The Nighttime Marauders, what they did here is they made it a challenge phase only. You can no longer use it outside challenge phase. I agree with this because, and I remember doing this to people and thinking, wow, this is so dumb. You marshal first, you bring them out of Shadows and marshaling, you pick like a 2 or 3 cost card, and then you end up discarding half their hand, and that's like game over because it's just too much of a heavy card advantage swing in your favor. Now that's no longer the case. If people are scared that you're going to play Nighttime Marauders and they have like a certain cost value that they don't want you to be able to hit, they have like a handful of 2 cost cards, they can try and marshal those. They have more of a ability to try and react to it instead of just being killed and marshaling before they even have the chance to spend gold. The Drowned Disciple, thank goodness they redesigned the Drown God deck a bit. I think Drown God, I'm skeptical of these passive power gain mechanics in general, always have been. And I think if you're going to have them, then people should be able to interact with it via the challenges somehow. Like with the Night's Watch wall, you can kneel it if you manage to do an unopposed challenge and shut it off. Drown God doesn't really have anything like that. It's like, okay, theoretically, if you put enough board pressure on them and kill their characters, but it's not really a thing unless you're, playing a dedicated aggro deck. Basically, I'm glad that this archetype got nerfed. This was one of my least favorite decks. One of the most, in my opinion, most non-interactive decks in the game. It was basically a combo deck that, instead of winning on turn 1 or 2, it would actually take it 3 or 4 turns to win the game, but would still do so in a very non-interactive fashion. And I believe what they did with the Disciple, he used to be, I think, limit twice per phase, which meant, as they say in the comment, if you had 3 of them, and you just marshal 2 characters out of your dead pile with Tarly, then you would get 6 power from the reaction in marshaling phase. And it's just, just that phase, never mind for other phases. Let me see if it was phase or round. And that's why I have Thrones DB open here so I can see the old versions of the card for purposes of comparison. Drowned Disciple. Yeah, it was just limit twice per phase. It wasn't even twice per round. So, you can be getting more in challenge phase than the way that you would close the game is you would Valar Morghulis and get like 4 more power in plot phase because all your stuff dies and these reactions would go off before they actually leave the board. It was really dumb. Now it doesn't matter how many you have. It doesn't matter if you have 1, 2, or 3. It's like the Drown God Fanatic, which is maxed once per round. You can only ever do it the same amount, no matter how many of them you have. And that puts a lot more of a reasonable limit on it, hopefully. The Drown God Fanatic, they made a few changes. First of all, now he discards instead of going straight into the dead pile, which is funny because it's actually kind of a buff in terms of, how do I say it, like decks that aren't Drown God that are interacting with the dead pile, because it makes them a Flea Bottom character now. Now you could never use this card with Flea Bottom before. Now there's more of an actual Greyjoy incentive to use Flea Bottom because you can use the interrupt and then he's in the Flea Bottom pile, which is kind of funny. But it also nerfs the card because his action to come into play still requires him to come out of play from your dead pile. So now you can no longer use the cancel, the free treachery ability, and bring him into play without having like Naga's Ribs or something to make it happen. But you can basically choose one or the other there. You can either, marshal him normally and let him die for military claim, then he can bounce in and out of the dead pile, or you can put him in discard to use the interrupt. Again, unless you're playing a dedicated Drown God deck with that Naga's Ribs or have some other kind of weird tech, he's no longer doing the multiple things that he was able to do before. Still a very versatile card, and I won't be surprised if it still ends up being in like every Greyjoy deck. Because again, even if you take this interrupt away and he just has this action, you'd probably still use him because he's still so useful as a fairly low cost character that can just keep reviving out of the dead pile over and over to stand. The Raider from Pike, this is a simple fix and one case among a lot where there's an obviously broken too powerful combo and a slight change in wording fixes it. Now it's each item or weapon with printing cost 0 or higher, so you can't use it with Pinch of Powder anymore. Problem solved, pretty straightforward. They say that they used the occasion to make him a bit better for your Raider decks. I'm not sure what they mean by that or how they did that. So let's... Why does my search history have Raid Shadow Legends? What in the world? That's weird. Stupid browser. Raider from Pike. So now it's item or weapon. Previously it was just weapon. I'm not sure what item cards this now includes, which makes that a big deal, because Pinch of Powder was an item, but you can't use that anymore. Maybe I can search by item. Oh, that's no fun. Oh, well, maybe the notation works here. This is how you search for cards when you're deck building, by trait. Oh, nice. Okay. So some items here that are not weapons. Archmaester's Key. Does that matter? Probably not. Fishing Net is a weapon anyways. Oh, Dragon Binder. Okay, so this is a good example. This is not a weapon, but it is an item. It costs 3, but you could pay 3 to ambush this and do Surprise Intimidate. That's definitely something. And there's banner like possibility with that as well. Obviously, you can that would let you ambush the mercenary contract if you're banner Targaryen to like surprise stand the character after they declare no defenders. Stuff like that could be done. There's not a ton of options here, but yeah, there's a slightly more possibility for interesting stuff. What is Cage of Ravens? I do not remember this card at all. I never remember anyone ever playing this. Oh man. All right, back to the video. I'm trying this time I'm going to try to keep it to a more reasonable length. Iron Mines, this is a card that I'm not sure if this really needed to be restricted, because they still left Greyjoy with Risen from the Sea. So it's like, okay, well, you can still run 3 bodyguards and 3 Risens, and it's not that much different. But apparently this was considered overpowered when it was being used to save people in the plot phase from Valar Morghulis. They took that ability away from it. I'm fine with that because the offensive Valar Morghulis from Greyjoy has always been pretty stupid and oppressive. Again, I think this has not really changed the possibility of the faction to play that way very much because they can still bodyguard. I guess the idea is you can play around bodyguard more because you can like reveal confiscation if you think it's going to be Valar. I don't know. Pretty indifferent about it. We take Westeros. This card was, again, significantly nerfed and completely justified in doing so. This was such a stupid plot. If you just take a Kingsroad with this, like that's all you use the ability for, then the stats on it were basically 8-9-1. And 6 reserve. And at that point, people would play it just for those stats, like 8-9-1. And it doesn't matter. The text can be blank. That's already a really overpowered plot. And then it had more possibilities on top of that to steal like the Red Keep or Dorne or whatever big location and basically win the game just because they happen to get one of their big locations into their discard. And then you can steal it and there's literally nothing they can do about it. So there is still the location steal ability here, but it's way more conditional. It's a challenges action now, so you cannot get something in plot phase and then like use it in marshalling. It's delayed a bit, and you have to kneel a Raider character, which again, as I just outlined, Raiders, it's, you're going to have to make some sacrifices to put Raider characters in your deck, probably. They're not great characters to start with. And the location you put into play has to have a lower cost than the Raider character that you kneel. So there's like so many different ways that the cost is increased there. You have to play Raider characters, you have to kneel the character, and if you want a big location, you have to kneel a big character. There's no more, if you were going to steal the wall, even the 4-cost wall, you're going to have to find a Raider that costs 5 or more to kneel, which is a big cost in and of itself. And then it's like, how many Raiders that cost 5 or more even exist in the game? It can't be very many. All right, come on, don't lag. I'm trying to record. Well, oh, there it is. So we've got Euron, Iron Victory's crew apparently is a Raider. If you want a banner over to Baratheon for Corraine Sathmantes, and that's literally it. It's like Euron and Iron Victory's crew. So it's it's going to be very rare to pull that off. Then makes the card a lot more reasonable. Taina, another card that was only on the restricted list because of combos, easily fixed by putting limit once per phase. Why was she ever printed without a limit? And this makes me happy because this is a card that there was like multiple times where I wanted to just toss in one copy of her, but I couldn't because she was restricted and she was going to crowd out, the other restricted card that I really needed. Even though she was going to be totally fine in my deck because I was just making a normal deck, in quotes normal, not a combo deck, but the fact that she was a combo card had crowded her out of being used in regular decks. That's no longer the case. There's several other cards that are that way that now are not going to be restricted and are cards that are still useful in regular decks, and I can use them now. Makes me happy. Red Keep, apparently this was considered too powerful. Again, I'm skeptical of whether this card was actually overpowered or not, but they just made it to where you have to pay 1 gold now to use it instead of being able to do it for free, which is fine. You still play it, and it gives you a free treachery. Well, not free. It used to be literally free. Now it's free in the sense that you don't have to play the event, so you're not spending a card, but you still have to pay 1 gold. And the ability to play a treachery every round off of a location, even paying the 1 gold every turn, is still plenty good. It's still a really good card. Desert Raider, another instance where it's like, thank goodness they fixed this card. Sort of like Drown God Fanatic, it just did so many different things. It was like, why would you ever have a deck that doesn't at least have 2 of these in there, and probably 3? I remember making a Kingdom of Shadows deck for Martell, and I still had these in the deck, even though their cost to marshal is increased by 1 in Kingdom of Shadows, because they're just that dumb. They basically permanently make military claim. It never matters if you just marshal 1 of them. It was a game warping card, really. Now it's prized 1. So first of all, when it leaves play is when they get the power. So that's a change, because it used to be that they would only gain power from its ability when you triggered the reaction. Now, after you use it to soak up military claim, they get the power right away. And more importantly than that, probably, it's prized, so the power goes to their faction card. And obviously, it used to be the case that you would use the reaction and that you would just put the power on some chump character of theirs that doesn't matter, like a reducer that's not going to stick around. So the fact that it gives your opponent power, which was supposed to be the balancing cost for it, in a lot of cases was not relevant. Now it's very relevant because it's, power going onto their faction card, it's going to be safe there. And you actually are paying a real cost to use the effect. That makes it a lot more difficult to just spam this to soak up military claim, infinitely. It's no longer going to be an automatic always click on it. Oh, it's really brain dead. That's going to be a lot more of a serious choice to make. And hopefully we'll restrict the card more to like icon control decks, which would actually play into its ability, and those would be the decks where it would be more worthwhile instead of just being an auto include. Dorn, I don't like Dorn because I'm sure I've talked about it a million times. I'm not sure if this doesn't even feel like that big of a nerf to Dorn. They removed the intrigue, so now it's only after you lose military or power. If you lose intrigue, you don't get to draw off of Dorn anymore, which is better than nothing, I guess. I still feel like this is a really dumb card that will be auto-include in all the lame-out Martell decks. But it's better than nothing, and I don't like this card, so I guess I'm glad that it got nerfed a bit. Duran's Game, this was a combo card, which it had a limit put on it in the sense that now you can only gain a maximum of 5 power from one Duran's Game, which is totally fine. I'm happy with that. I don't like the Duran's game decks where it's like, oh, the rest of the game didn't matter because I got I got the X on this event to equal 10 with my Ricasso that has 5 gold on it, and then I won one single challenge and got 10 power off one of these. That was really dumb. I'm glad that's been toned down a bit. A mission in Essos, I don't even remember what the original version of this card was. I remember it was something utterly bizarre that like no one would ever use. Again, outside of what they say in the comment, possibly combo decks. I'm not sure if it was ever used even in combo decks, but definitely it was no good in anything else. So this is something interesting that they did, which I agree with. And I frankly would like to see this done to more cards that are like dumb and that where I feel like the idea of the card is just wrong. One of the number one candidates would be Dorn. I wouldn't mind just seeing Dorn totally redesigned this way. So they literally redesigned this card. They didn't nerf it. It just does something totally different now from what it did originally, which is good. As for whether the card will be worth using or not, it's a Shadow Zero event, which is return a Martel character you control to your hand, then search your deck for a character with lower printing cost that shares a trait and put it into play. Obviously, Martel has a lot of strong enters play cards, like the core set Ario Hota, the Dornish Spy, Green Blood Trader, all that stuff that's sort of the cornerstone of a lot of Martel decks. And using an action to return those characters to your hand, especially because you could do it in the middle of a challenge to like surprise ambush again with Ario Hota, you can see some obvious value in that. The issue there is the trait limitation and like searching your deck for lower printed costs and stuff. If you're just using it to bounce the character back to your hand, I don't know if it's worth it. It's probably worth it if you have like an efficient character that can be put into play using the trait thing here. And I remember looking through yesterday. I don't think I'm going to do it again, but like a lot of those staple comes into play ability cards, they have weird traits that aren't shared by a lot of other super relevant cards that also fit the cost limitation. Like Ario Hota's only trait is guard. I don't like, there's not really a bunch of relevant guard characters. All right, I lied. I am going to do it. I'm going to look. Relevant guard characters that cost less than 3 is a huge limitation. Yeah, the only guards that we can find here that cost less than 3 are not Martel cards. It's Lannisport left and right. So that's, you're really not going to be able to put anything into play that way. This version of him maybe would be more usable. What guards could you use then? Oh, that doesn't really open up anything. They all cost like 4. White Harbor Watchman if you're Banner Stark. And then, Dornish Spy, the trait is Spy. And I think within Martel, there's like not a bunch of other relevant spy characters that cost less than 3. Yeah, there's literally not any. The only other 2 Martel cards here also cost 3, so it doesn't do anything. I remember the one notable combo that is like pretty decent is the Green Blood Trader, I think. That's not a trait, that's a title search. Because they have Ally. Yeah, Ally, and the Desert Scavenger also has Ally. So you can use this event to return Green Blood Trader to your hand, search your deck, put a Desert Scavenger into play, and marshal the Green Blood Trader again. But it's still kind of questionable if that's worth it because you're spending an event, so you're spending a card to trigger the Green Blood Trader again. So you're getting a card off the Green Blood ability, but that's kind of canceled out by the event. The bonus card that you get in that case is the Desert Scavenger. Is it worth putting an event in your deck, a 2 gold event, to like put a Desert Scavenger into play? That's probably not really worth it. I don't know. I think this has probably too many conditions and limitations to be useful, but there's at least some theory crafting that can be done. One more card that I'm going to look at here that comes to mind is the, oh man, what is that thing called? It like bounces characters back to their hand if they have 1 icon. Southron Messenger. I can't type. Southron Messenger, yes. Oh, why did I click on that? The trait, and it also has Ally, okay. Oh no, why is it listing them this way? This is terrible. Don't do this. I need the list that was showed before. Yeah, we gotta do it like this. There's going to be so many allies, it's going to be really hard to look through. But the 3-cost ally trait on Southward Messenger, because it costs 3, now you can see already, like, alright, you could get a Desert Raider. Maybe that's more worth it. There's got to be some more here. Prince's Attendant, that could be more worth it. Although this doesn't really go along with icon removal decks, it goes along with Lord and Lady decks, but you can potentially mix those two together if you're using certain versions of the Martel Lords. Like there's the Duran that goes with icon removal. There's an Ariane that does it now with, I think she's a Shadows card that it's like if a card comes out of Shadows. You can do Orphan of the Greenblood with it. There's some more possibilities there. That's way too much time spent on that card though, so we're going to move on. Yorin, this was an extremely dumb card. Probably does not need too much further explanation of why it was stupid. The comment pretty much lays it out. You know, you pay 6 and you steal their 5-cost character. So they're losing 5 gold worth of stuff, and you're gaining 5, which is like a 10 gold swing in your favor. And even with the horrible stats for his cost, that was just way too broken. And as they point out, that character could have attachments, it could have power on it. Like that's sort of the minimum. Like it can do even more damage than that depending on the situation. So now the way that it works is the opponent chooses the character rather than you getting to choose. And obviously that makes all the difference. And as they point out, still a good card in an attrition deck, but in like, it's no longer an auto-include that's just going to go in every deck forever. Because if you just, splash this card into other decks that aren't attrition now, they're just like, oh, I'm going to give you my reducer, and now it's a bad card. Still a card that will get played in attrition decks, unfortunately. Who knows, maybe attrition decks are going to make a big comeback now that all these broken cards that were making sort of power rush decks that were too fast or too like non-interactive or whatever, that the control decks couldn't keep up with them. Maybe now control is going to be a big deal. Who knows? Klyda's was a card that I underestimated. I remember when Klyda's came out, I was like, oh, this card doesn't seem that good. It's like, oh, you steal 1 gold per round, whatever. I was completely wrong. Klyda's ended up being an extremely annoying card because you could use his action once per phase, I believe. And so you would combine him with trading with the Pintoshi, steal all 3 gold that it gives to the opponent, and basically you get a 13 gold plot, and they don't get any gold off of it. Obviously that was really dumb. Plus, just even, if he even steals 2 gold a turn, he's already such an oppressive card, which was very easy for him to do. It's like steal 1 in marshalling, steal 1 in challenges. Now you have to kneel him, so that's a way bigger cost, and it has a limit of twice per round. So there's no more instances of playing trading with the Pintoshi and stealing all 3 of the gold. And if you're stealing, you have to kneel your 4-cost character. So, paying 4 and kneeling the character to steal gold is a lot less efficient than how it was previously, where he could still do challenges. They did add the ability to kneel a Raven card to steal, so now your Messenger Ravens that weren't going to do anything else can kneel for Klydas to steal gold. That makes him still, pretty playable, pretty relevant. I would say if he didn't have that condition on him, I don't know if he would ever be worth playing. But I would be fine with this card never being worth playing because Choke is stupid. No one should play Choke. I'm glad he's nerfed. Halder was a very oppressive card. Halder made challenges impossible to do against builder decks. Like, the challenge math quickly just got completely out of hand because they'd have 5 or more locations or attachments they could kneel. And all of the way that his ability was before, it's all 1 at a time. So they could always perfectly distribute all of those little +1 strength buffs to exactly win every challenge. Now there's a limit, first of all, so they can only do it twice, and they have to choose up front how much they're going to commit, which does make a big difference, because previously, like if you do a challenge against them with 5 strength and they defend with 5 strength, they would use, and like let's say I have Marjorie from Corset that could buff me by 3. They would just use him once and go up to 6 strength. Now I can kneel Marjorie, and if I kneel Marjorie and go up to 8, they'll use him 3 more times and be at 9 and still win. Or if I don't use Marjorie, then they don't have to trigger any more additional locations, and they still have that potential +3 strength available for the next challenge. The way that it works now, the advantage would be to the player that has Marjorie sitting there, because they would have, if they use the action to only kneel 1 location, then you can trigger Marjorie, and they would have to use the action again to kneel 3 locations, and then they'd be done for the phase. That'd be it. They can't do it anymore. Previously, there was no limit. So I don't know if I'm explaining it properly, but it makes like counterplay against the card a lot more possible, because they have to actually, to be more efficient, if they don't want me to win using Marjorie, they'd have to just commit 4 locations up front so that they'd still be able to use it again later in the phase. I don't know, again, if I'm explaining that properly, but basically makes the card a lot more fair, and probably still going to be, 2 or 3 copies in every builder's deck. Still a plenty good card without making the challenge phase impossible like he used to. 3-Finger Hob, as they point out, best draw card in the game. Now he only draws 1 card unless your hand size is at least 5 lower than your reserve value. So if you have basically an empty hand or a really big reserve, then he can draw 2. Draw 1 card per turn is still really good on a 2-cost character. He'll still be in every deck. He's no longer as stupid as he was before. And they now he supports the Night's Watch increase your reserve theme. Does that matter? Is that something that I'm going to get excited about? Not really. Whatever. Abandoned Stronghold. This is a card that I wasn't sure if this needed to be restricted. Apparently people felt that it did. I never felt like I was losing games to Abandoned Stronghold. I felt like I was losing games to other stuff, but I guess, as they point out, if you have more than one of these, they sort of are like Howder, in the sense that it's like too much challenge phase strength buff flexibility. It was just really hard to ever get past them. So now it's unique. You can only have one of them at a time. I guess that's a nerf. I guess that makes a difference. I'm fine with builders being nerfed, so alright, sure, it can be unique. I remember, I think in my builder decks, I didn't even use this card. I was like, this isn't necessary. I want more stuff that, blocks challenges, like the Haunted Forest, or stuff that blocks stealth, and etc. The way that you would get your wall knelt would be when you just couldn't get any characters to defend the challenge at all. Being able to buff the strength of the character was like a secondary concern. Bound for the Wall was a card sort of like Yorin. It was really dumb because, it's such an easy trigger. Just win any challenge. That's all you have to do. And then if you reveal, Tywin Lannister, that's it. You stole Tywin. You probably won at that point. So randomly winning on turn 1 because you just, happened to win a challenge and play this event, and there's nothing they can do about it. That was dumb. Now it discards the top 2, and it's like the 6-cost wall where the opponent chooses the character that you're going to get. So now there's ways to play around it by seeding the discard pile with cheap characters that you don't care about. It only discards the top 2, so the chance that it's going to discard something really big is not as much, and so forth and so on. You can still potentially force people to give you Tywin Lannister with this, but you're going to have to get lucky or really set it up. It's going to have to be in a dedicated recruitment steal stuff deck. Whereas previously, it was an auto-include, and I'm glad that it's no longer an auto-include. Wyman was obviously a card that was too strong. So the changes they made to Wyman, previously his reaction was 3 times per round, now it's once per phase. So that's obviously a pretty big nerf, and I think just being able, even doing it once, now just being able to do it once per phase is way more balanced. He's still really good, even doing it once per phase. And his action is now kill, it's no longer sacrifice. It used to be sacrifice, and that matters because, the Stark sacrifice triggers, sacrifice was the best wording they could get. There was cards that reacted to when a character is sacrificed or killed, and then there was cards that only reacted to a character being sacrificed. The most notable one was Mira Reed, which is interesting because they also changed Mira to where she no longer goes back into stealth off of sacrifice. So this would have been a really big deal with the old version of Mira, but Mira was changed, so now it's not as big of a deal anyways, if that makes sense. But still, they made him a lot more reasonable and balanced with this. And speaking of Mira Reed, first of all, they increased her cost to 2. It used to be 1 gold to bring her out, now it's 2. I think maybe that would have been enough by itself. Paying 2 gold every time you use her instead of 1, doubling the cost, would make her considerably more expensive if you're using her 2 or 3 times a turn. But now, for her to go back into Shadows, first of all, it's not optional, and it's based on a winter plot coming out. So that's way more of a limit, because having to use winter plots by itself is like a big, it's a big decrease in the ability to use her. Now the fact that you're playing with winter plots in order to enable this card, that's a huge cost in and of itself, and probably makes the card balanced. And as they point out, this also means that you inherently cannot use her more than once per turn, once per round, unless, I'm trying to think of, are you somehow going to reveal a winter plot with Reigns of Castamere? Are there any plots that are both winter and scheme? I don't think so. That's never really going to happen or be worth thinking about, I don't think. Bear Island Scout, I'm not sure if this card was restricted or, only on the pod extended RL. But I agree with them changing it because it was way too good before. It was auto-include 3 of them in every Stark deck. Because even if you don't have any other House Mormont cards, you would just search for the other 2 Bear Island Scouts. So it's a 2-cost character that gets you 2 more 2-cost characters like for free. It was like 2 extra cards. And on a little chump, you just pay 2 gold for it. That was way too efficient. There was no reason to ever not use it. Now, if you don't have other House Mormont cards in your deck, there's a serious possibility that you're going to reveal the top 10, you won't find either of the other scouts, and then it didn't do anything, and it's not really that good of a card, because 2 cost 1 strength that didn't do anything else, that basically has blank text, is all of a sudden that's no longer very good. But I do expect between Alyssane and Daisy, most Stark decks will probably still have enough Mormonts to justify this card, and it'll still be pretty good. Although even in those decks, you'll be forced to take whatever is in the top 10. You won't be able to, let's say I know I want Alyssane. I can always get her because I'm searching my whole deck. Now I have to hope she's in the top 10. I might just be forced to, take another scout when I wanted Alyssane, for example. Skagos, another card that I guess was only on the extended restricted list because the combos with sacrifice cards were too powerful. Now it's been nerfed because, first of all, you have to pay a gold to keep using it, because to use the sacrifice action on it, it goes back to Shadows, and you have to pay a gold to bring it out of Shadows. Although, like they note here, that does mean you can use it once per round, because you can send it back to Shadows, bring it out, then bounce it back to Shadows again, as long as you can keep paying for it. So that could potentially be a buff. But also, really the biggest change here is that it sacrifices a standing start card, and the card comes into play knelt when you bring the new copy in. And that's a big deal because previously, a lot of times you would just use this card to get rid of Milk of the Poppy on one of your characters, for example. And it was like a free clear of the negative attachments because it would be like they're still standing and now they don't have any attachments. Now if you do this, like if you want to get Milk off your Wyman Manderley, he's going to come into play knelt, which actually makes me think about the timing. Like, if you use this on Wyman, will the new copy be able to stand himself in response? I don't know. But you see what I'm getting at there. Now you're actually having a real cost if you use it to clear attachments and so forth and so on. Anytime that you use this card now, it's inefficient for how many challenges you can do because the character is being knelt out without actually getting to do a challenge. Ward, this is a dumb card that I would have been fine with never seeing again. The way that they changed it, now it's only unique characters. I guess that kind of matters. There's still going to be a lot of really good targets for it. But it's true that now you can't use it to steal the opponent's reducer to set up March to the Wall. So I guess that is a thing. Now there's more ability to play around it. Because if you're scared of Ward, if you're up against Stark or Night's Watch Banner of the Wolf, and they're going to have Ward, you can just not marshal your uniques that would be hit by this, and you can just rely on non-uniques to be your claim soak. So that does give a lot more possibility to play around it. And the character gets prized either 1, or if they cost 3 or more, then they get prized 2. So you also are giving the opponent power if you use it, which I think is not as relevant because typically the way that the attrition deck works is it doesn't really matter if the opponent has 10 power on their faction card. That's not your win condition. Your win condition is going to be when they don't have characters left. And the prize doesn't really interact with that. But either way, these nerfs hopefully make it to where it's no longer an auto-include, and that's fine. Because it was basically an auto-include. It's it was really hard to justify making a Stark deck that didn't have this card in it before. Again, before it went on the restricted list, which was absolutely where it belonged. I Am No One, another event where it's like, I think it just did too many different things all at once. It gave, insight, stealth, and doesn't kneel to attack, all for one. And usually you would draw two or even three cards off of it, so it would pay for itself in terms of card advantage. So again, it was hard to ever have a Stark deck that didn't have this card in it. Now they've made it to where it has to be a unique character with three or lower, and probably most important, the character doesn't gain stealth. That's a big difference because the fact that the character gains stealth previously made it almost impossible or very difficult to defend against the multiple challenges that they were going to do and block the card from like drawing off of insight. Now, if you use this on like Sansa Stark that just has an intrigue and a power icon, or some other small character, it's a lot more possible that you can actually defend both challenges. And then the opponent got like some challenge phase efficiency out of it, but they didn't draw off of insight, and they spent this event, so they're actually down a card at that point. And that would be, you can actually counterplay it that way. Whereas previously, a lot of times with stealth and doesn't kneel to attack, it was too much, and you just had to sort of sit there and take it. And interestingly, they did specify now that you can choose Arya Stark, so you can use it on the bigger versions of Arya. And I think the 5-cost Arya has 3 icons and stealth. Am I right about that? Yes, she has 3 icons and stealth. So it's setting up a Wombo combo with that card. Incentivizes you to combo with her if there's ever a deck where you use this card. I don't remember this being a super great card, but it's like a fun one. You could give it a shot. They fixed Daenerys here. I do not quite remember how the original version of this card worked. I knew that it was putting stuff into play for free. I think now they've added a faction card kneel, which obviously matters a lot. I think previously it didn't have that, because that's turning off a lot of really powerful other effects that kneel your faction card. So that's already a big change. Let me recall what the old version was. Yeah, so previously it was search the top 10 for any attachment or dragon card, reveal it, and add it to your hand, and you could put it into play if it costs 3 or less. Like, it would just go straight into play. This version is interesting because you can search for dragon or title. You can't get any attachment. It has to be a title, but you can put it into play no matter what it is. Whereas previously it had to cost 3 or less. So now you can use it to put, and I think as they point out here, they made her, this is the card you use with the big dragons, quote unquote, the versions from the expansion box that cost like 7 or 8. You can put like one of those 7 or 8 cost dragon cards straight into play, and then at the end of the phase they'll come back to your hand. The titles, however, will stay in play attached to Daenerys, so she has like multi-purpose abilities there. It's, are you going to build the deck around the big dragons, or stacking the titles on her, or what's the case going to be? This, I guess it's a nerf just because there's a faction card kneel now, where previously there wasn't. I agree the previous version of the card was too strong. I'm still concerned about this version only because of a card that I'm going to get to down here. Now you can put this guy into play with her ability. It's like, oh, I found my 6-cost Drogon. He's going to bounce into play for free, murder an important character, and I'm going to win the game off of it. And the fact that it bounces back to my hand at the end of the turn doesn't really matter because I just needed to get my Drogon trigger off and murder your important character to win the game. That's going to be really stupid, and I do expect, even with the nerf that they've made to Drogon here, it's like any deck with this version of Daenerys in it's probably going to have this guy flying around, and I'm not looking forward to that. I mean, it's very notable to me that the previous version of this card could not do that combo. I mean, you could search your deck for the 6-cost dragon, 6-cost Drogon, and put it in your hand, but you still have to pay 6 gold to put it into play, which you probably wouldn't be able to do on the same turn that you marshal her. Now you can bring her out and get this guy into play on the same turn if he's in the top 10. Not looking forward to that. I just explained why I don't like Drogon and why I agree with the way that they nerfed him. As they point out, he wasn't even on the restricted list, but obviously they understood that, he was pretty much borderline, might as well have been on the restricted list. Like, he was on that level. And they just reduced his ability from -4 to -3. So that does greatly reduce the range of 5 and 6 cost characters that he can murder by himself. That is a pretty significant nerf. I still don't like the card because this is one of those cards where I just hate the idea of the card. I just don't like having a character that's like, oh, you have to, if they win one challenge with this character, then a lot of times the game is just over. So the situations where that will be the case will now be less common because it will be a lot less frequent for someone to be able to just push through one challenge with this card and not really even need to do anything else and then win the game off of it because it kills your your Melisandre or whatever important character. But there will still be situations like that, and it's still going to feel bad when it happens. Still not a fun card, but at least it's weaker. Hizdahr, as they say, this is the first of 3 Targ Econ cheats that have all been properly nerfed. I didn't get to play. Oh, I'm going to have to sneeze. Let me pause the video. Yeah, I got that pause button. I feel like there wasn't a pause button in the old version of OBS that I was using last year. That's useful. I didn't get to play enough to figure, Womb of the World was really good in some of the decks I made with it, no doubt. It was obviously a strong card. Was it broken? This is something where I kind of quit playing the game right after this came out. I didn't have a lot of time to get a good feel for how powerful it was. But it doesn't surprise me that they're nerfing it, because previously what you could do is you could either put Khal Drogo or Raiding Khalazar into play with it, and those were both really overpowered. If you cheat in a Raiding Khalazar this way, and you get through that, 3-claim military or whatever, that was often a game-winning play. And yeah, it's like too much value to be getting those huge characters into play for free, and they're coming back to your hand, so it's also card advantage. Even though you have to pay for them to put them back out again, it was still too much, I guess. Now you have to put the eligible Dothraki with the lowest printed cost, which creates this interesting tension where, you want to have enough Dothraki characters in your deck that this hits something, but you don't want to clog your deck up with weak, cheap Dothraki cards that aren't as strong when they're put into play for free by this effect. Like the 2-cost guys, what are they called? Like Braided Warriors or something like that. It's just like a 2-cost, 3-strength military icon. Well, if you get that into play with this card, that's decent, but it's not really what you're looking for. So you're going to have to balance out between, how many expensive Dothrakis versus how many cheaper ones you're going to put in your deck with this effect, because you have to pick the weakest one that you hit. Or I guess if they're tied, with the lowest printing cost, yeah, like if there's 2 3-costs that are revealed, you could pick which one, I guess, but that's not really relevant. Yes, no more Kotho on Claim 2 plots is a very good thing. What they did to Kotho is they put a summer condition on him. That's a great change. I agree with that. More incentive to actually play summer plots. Is that relevant? I don't know. But this character, yeah, this was another card that I wanted it to not be as good as it was. Every time the opponent used it, I wanted to tell myself, oh, they spent, 2 cards out of their hand just to get this intrigue challenge. Is that really worth it? I guess at the end of the day it was, because he still ended up in every single Targaryen deck. And now he's no longer going to be auto-include. Now it's going to have to be, even in a Dothraki or a Bloodrider deck, if you're not using at least a few summer plots, he's probably not worth it. And, he's not as powerful now because even in most dedicated summer decks, you're probably not going to run 7 summer plots. You'll probably run 5 or something like that. So there will still be the chance to have turns where his ability can't be used. Having to run 5 summer plots as your plot deck so that you can enable this card, that's a pretty significant cost. That will probably make him a lot more balanced. Hizdahr, so the biggest change here is they made it to where now you have to discard a character card. You can no longer discard an extra econ location that you don't need, or a bodyguard or something. You have to discard characters, and that definitely matters. It means that he is now, he's still going to be used with Flea Bottom. You can still discard your second sons into the Flea Bottom pile with him. But it's not as overpowered as it was before, because sometimes, you're going to be forced to, well, I really want to get this, 6-cost Drogon ambushed in for only 3, but I don't have, enough characters in my hand to pay for that. You're not going to be able to get your 6-cost Drogon in with this ability, by discarding an irrelevant event or something along those lines. It's just less flexible, and it's limit once per round, which is fine. The ability to use it twice per round, I guess, was overpowered. I think the discarding one character card is more relevant. Even with limit once per round, he'll still be pretty good. Murine, this obviously was too powerful of a card. Now you have to discard a card to use the ability. So every time you activate Murine now, you are losing a card, basically. Again, unless you have, Flea Bottom or other discard pile shenanigans, which, as they point out, that makes it a card for dedicated discard decks instead of just being auto-include. That's a good change. Maybe it'll still be too good. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But I definitely like this version a lot better. Because, again, now there's an actual cost to using it. It's not thoughtless. It's not just something like, oh, well, I'm just going to do it because I feel like it, and I don't really have to think about whether it's worth it or not, because it doesn't have any cost associated with it. Crown of Gold, similar to Drogon, this is a card that I'd rather just not be in the game, and I question whether or not it has actually been buffed, because it's no longer draw deck limit 1. Now you can have 3 of these. That's really fun. But they did take away the terminal condition. Well, technically, weird wording, right? Because I think the comment here even says it removes the terminal burn effect. The attachment itself is still technically terminal, different sense of the word. But you have to have some other kill effect. It's no longer -4 strength and dead if 0, both on the same card. So that is a meaningful change to require that you have some other burn effect, but is that going to matter that much in a dedicated burn deck? I feel like not really. What it does is it relegates this card only to burn decks, basically. Whereas previously, there was not really any reason for any Targaryen deck to ever not have one of these in it. But within those burn decks, I still feel like, again, it might be too good, and it might even be better, because now you can have 3 of them. And the characters that you put them on are probably still going to get killed without too much effort. The extremely obnoxious combo with Blood of the Dragon, as they point out, can still be used to delete a 5-strength character with almost 0 counterplay, because you can't even, the way that the timing works out, if you reveal Confiscation, it's already too late. They're just going to instantly die when blood is flipped, and you're not going to be able to confiscate the crown. So and now, you could potentially kill 2 characters that way, which would probably be, if you even get 1 character like that, a lot of times it ends the game. Getting 2 definitely would be. So I don't know. I don't like this. Oh, I guess it's still unique. I don't know if it was, it probably was unique originally. So you can't have 2 of them out at the same time. But obviously, it's not a card that you want to stay in play. You want to kill the character, and, then it'll get discarded, and you can play the next one from out of your hand. Same as with Ward. So I'm skeptical of this. Gifts for the Widow, I don't know if this was overpowered. Again, it was definitely a good card, and obviously the Qohor decks, this is a staple. It'll probably still be a staple in Qohor decks. All they did is they added a faction card, Neil. I think that's fine. I'm not sure if it was overpowered, but I think that it's not unreasonable to have a faction card, Neil, as an additional condition to use it. Mace Tyrell, this is an unfortunate card where it had a really cool mechanic on this action down here that was ruined by completely broken, overpowered top ability, the reaction where Mace was gaining power whenever characters were coming into play. And obviously you would combo this with the Hightower. It would be too stupid. Interestingly, they did not redesign the Hightower, I don't think. Yeah, it's not on here. So I guess the idea is that the Hightower was only broken with Mace, and that, like, without Mace, Hightower is a fine card. I'm not sure if that's true. I lean towards probably it is. I guess we'll find out. Anyways, the way they fixed him, and I agree, this is a good change. Now it's only when a unique Tyrell character enters play, and much more importantly than that, the power goes on that character. So the power is going to be divided up. It's going to be like 1 power each on 3 or 4 different characters. Previously, it would just all get stacked on the Mace. So all they have to do is like dupe Mace, put a bodyguard on him. They just have to protect this one body, and all that passive power was safe. Now that's not going to be the case anymore. So he's not going to be as much of a non-interactive win condition as he was in the past. But he does still have the potential, especially if you're getting up towards the double-digit numbers of power, you can still threaten to close games out with this. His action, now you can actually focus on using it to do some cool combos instead of just using it to trigger his reaction every time. Because obviously this action does not actually combo with his reaction, because if you remove the character from play to trigger the reaction, they're going to lose whatever power they already had on them. It doesn't work like the way that it was before. You would just use this action to stack more power on the Mace. Queen's Retinue, this is a combo card that was used to mill people, easily fixed by saying each opponent may draw 2 instead of making it forced. Simple, makes the card usable again. Seems pretty good. Old Town Informer, another combo card that was fixed by giving it limit twice per phase. I don't know, is it not? Well, I guess the combo decks in general now have just been nerfed enough that it doesn't matter. Limit twice per phase still makes it plenty usable. Like, yes, I feel like you could still get a lot of mileage in a combo deck even with limit twice per phase out of this card, but I don't care. I'm just glad it's off the restricted list because I always like this card. It does so many different things and has so many different mechanics and a fairly neat package. It's got Ambush, it's got Bestow, it has Draw Filter, Discard Pile. You can use it with Flea Bottom. I would put it in Shadow decks, I remember, because you could like ambush it in the challenge phase. You didn't have to worry about marshaling it normally. This was a versatile card that I always enjoyed using. I'm glad it's off the restricted list so I can use it again. Unexpected Guile, this was a really like cancer card in Kingdom of Shadows because you could just use it on like Sir Robert Strong and reuse him multiple times in one phase and just kill everything. That was really stupid. There was like too much infinite value potential with this card. There was very little answer to it. Those Kingdom of Shadows decks that would use this to just replay, like, what's the Lannister guy that makes you discard 2 or kill a character? I can't remember. Mandon Moore, I think. Yeah, you could like replay that one until they're dead and dumb stuff like that. Now, after you win a challenge with this, I think the old version put Unexpected Guile and the character back in Shadows. Now the character goes back to Shadows, but Unexpected Guile does not. It will return to your hand. So you can only use it once per turn. And you have to marshal it back into Shadows every time, so you have to pay more gold to keep using it. Let me compare it to the old version of it. Yeah, Unexpected Guile. Yeah, so now it's Shadow 1 in the old version. The new version is Shadow 0, but because it's bouncing back to your hand instead of going back into Shadows, you have to pay 2 gold every time you use it now, instead of just paying 2 gold once and then you paying 1 for every trigger after that. I think they took away the plus strength, right? Oh, they took away the insight, so that's another nerf. It used to gain insight, now it just gains plus 2 strength. That is actually pretty relevant. And yeah, when a challenge ends in which attached character is participating, return Guile and attached character to Shadows. So it used to be not only would it send the attachment back to Shadows, but it was anytime the character was in a challenge. So it didn't matter if you defended the challenge or not. There was no counterplay. They're still going back into Shadows. Now, like if you want to block Mandon Moore from going back into Shadows with this, they have to win the challenge. So you can counterplay it by defending against his challenge and not letting him win it. And then he'll stay in play with Unexpected Guile attached to him, and you can confiscate it next turn. Whereas the previous version, it was almost impossible to ever actually hit this with attachment hate because it would only come out of Shadows for that one challenge, and then it would go straight back into Shadows, and there was like no way to stop it. Unless, maybe you could Treachery it. Although I think, does Treachery even work on attachments? I think it was only characters or locations. I guess the Red Keep, could potentially stop it. But it was extremely difficult to interact with it, is the point. And now there's like more that you can do about it. All Men Are Fools, this was used as a one-shot kill card in combo decks. Again, I'm not sure how much of a nerf this really is. Like, now the limit is with up to 5 lady characters, you can get 5 power, and each one of them would get 1 power. And I think the old version, though, was you just got power equal to however many ladies you had, right? Yeah, it's after you win a challenge by 5 or more strength. That's still there. Each lady character you control gains power. So it's max 1 per phase. I guess that's the big change there, because it used to be 1 per challenge. So I think the limit of up to 5 lady characters is not that relevant, because even in a combo deck, how likely was it that you were going to get more than 5 lady characters on the board? Maybe I'm underestimating how stupid that deck was, but I feel like, you probably weren't going to get more than 5 anyways. But what you would do is you would get 1 on your Intrigue challenge and then 1 on your Power challenge, and you would get like 8 to 10 power by playing 2 of these. Now, instead of 1 per challenge, it's just 1 per phase, so that's a big nerf. And still in my opinion, a totally viable card for like lady rush decks. but no longer a kill you on turn 2 combo card. To the Rose banner got the same treatment as a mission in Essos, which again I completely agree with. Now it's kneel your faction card to do Mace's action. Like it bounces a character out of the game for a phase and then they come back standing. And like gets this can be used to take Milk of the Poppy off of characters. You could use this to reuse Inter's play effects. Obviously, if you want to be obnoxious, you can use it with House Florent Knight. It has some actual combos where you could see, putting this in a deck now. Whereas the previous version, as they point out, was basically only a combo card. So this is a good change. Flea Bottom, yes, good old Flea Bottom. This card has such a turbulent history. They have now made it a bestow card. And my concern is that it's going to be like overpowered in bestow specific decks, especially because I'll probably be covering this in my next video. They're releasing like these new cards. They actually made a new pack of cards, the same like design team, whoever this is, with a bunch of bestow support in it, like cards that add gold to bestow cards or move gold around to put more gold onto your cards. And that's what's concerning to me. Is if it ends up being the case that there's like a really easy, efficient ways to just play this with maybe 1 gold on it, and then all the bestow support just piles enough gold on it that you can keep using it forever, maybe it'll be too strong then. Although even then you would also have to find ways to seed your discard pile on top of that, and have like relevant characters with abilities that are really strong when they're comboed with this, like the Martell cards or the Fishwife. What is that? Man, that Greyjoy character. It's like Saltwife. I think that was her name. That would like sacrifice herself to prevent people from defending and different things like that. You still need to have a lot more moving pieces, even in that worst case scenario. So it'll probably be fine. And outside of bestow like centric decks, it's definitely not broken or overpowered. Now, even with discard pile synergy, like even if you're Targaryen with Second Sons, you can only use it a maximum of 3 times, and you have to pay 4 gold for it, which is huge. That makes a big difference. Paying 4 instead of only paying 1 to use Second Sons 3 times, that's a lot more fair, and I think will make it more reasonable. Like, it's still a card that I would probably put in any type of Targaryen discard deck, but it would just actually be balanced instead of being game-breaking in that deck. Iron Bank, yeah, apparently this was a card that was killing people with Orphan of the Greenblood combo with Sparrows. How does it work with Core Sansa? There must be some interaction with Core Sansa where her max 1 per round like resets if you bounce her back to hand, I guess. I can see the combo with Sparrows is you just keep replaying your Sparrows until you get all their power. Anyways, they limited it to you can only get 5 gold on it at a time, which is still, you can still rack up huge amounts very easily. If you have 5 gold on this and you put another 5 on it, that's already a huge bank. But it doesn't have as much potential to get you like 30 gold or something that's totally ridiculous to where you just have infinite gold and you can do these combos. This is a good change, I think. I don't know if this card is ever worth using in regular decks. I guess with the additional bestow support that they're putting in, maybe it'll be a bestow card. I think it's still not a great card in like a normal deck. Great Hall, they made Great Hall unique. Now you can only have 1 of them. That's fine. I'm glad that I can play Great Hall again. It's good that they made it like more balanced and reasonable without having to remove it from the game like that. Dornishman's Wife, this was a combo card, I believe. Like all the decks that use this, it would go in combo decks to just like get extra power and draw. And you never really saw it in a regular deck. I'm not sure if it's still ever worth using in a regular deck. Obviously, so when a unique character is killed, they can gain 2 power if they have a power icon. Well, they're being killed, so what good is that? They're just going to leave play and lose the power. Obviously, what you do then is you have a unique character die when you're at 13 power, and then you win the game. I don't think that's any good in a normal deck because cards that like conditionally just grant you extra power and that's all they do, those are cards that's like you need a dedicated rush deck for those to be viable. Normal good stuff decks don't really use cards like Lady Sansa's Rose, So I don't think this will be good for that reason. I don't know if there will be some type of weird combo that makes it good as a rush card in that way. I guess we'll find out. Maybe it's going to be a Drown God card because you're killing all your characters anyways when you're Drown God. So this way you like can win the game at 13 power more easily. I don't know. The other two effects here, where if the character has military and intrigue, you can gain 2 gold and draw 2 cards. Is that worth it? I don't know. My knee-jerk reaction is probably not. And it's like, oh man, the character died. Well, just draw 2 cards. I'm trying to compare that to Funeral Pyre, which I like Funeral Pyre. That was a card that I would always try to use. But even when I was building around Funeral Pyre, it often ended up being like very questionable as to whether that was worth it or not. And that was 0 gold, draw 3, if I recall correctly. This is 1 gold, draw 2. Probably not worth it. I don't know. I guess, now maybe someone will use it outside of combo decks, so that's an improvement, if nothing else. Bribery, they stopped the combo with Mercenary Contract because the character has to have no attachments on it. Previously, what would happen is you'd put Mercenary Contract on something, and then you just take control of it with this event. That was extremely dumb. Glad that they stopped that. Similar situation to Raider from Pike, where now that that's gone, this card should be pretty balanced. And probably won't see much play. They promise that it'll be good with their upcoming Bestow Mercenary theme. We'll see if that ends up being true. I'm just glad that people aren't going to be using it with Mercenary Contract anymore. Dragon's Tail, interesting choice here to make it melee only. I don't think that's ever been done with any other card. Obviously, there's cards that are de facto melee only, in the sense that they're only worth using in melee. This is now a card where it's being enforced that it can only be used in melee, because its only use in Joust was ever combo decks and mill decks, which are both, decks that we don't want in the game. I'm fine with that. It's no problem having a card banned to melee. That's cool with me. Kingdom of Shadows, they improved this a lot because the old version of Kingdom of Shadows, it increased the gold cost to marshal your characters normally. So if you were just going to marshal a character onto the field without using like shadows or ambush or anything, it cost 1 extra gold, and that was extremely inefficient. So it very strongly incentivized you to basically never use any normal marshaling. And what you would end up with then is 2 problems where, first of all the Kingdom of Shadows decks would have all the same characters. It would just be like all the best non-loyal Shadows cards from every faction. There would be very little character diversity because, again, there was such a strong disincentive to ever just marshal cards onto the board normally. Also, it would lead to really lame non-interactive games where the Kingdom of Shadows player just has an empty board. They would just marshal all their characters in the shadows and then just sit there, and they don't have a board, so there's not very much for you to interact with. And they would just be, doing resets and wait until they feel like doing challenges and like lame you out with Robert Strong and stuff like that. It very quickly became a not fun deck to play against. It was one of those archetypes like the Free Folk and Sea of Blood, which are also redesigned here, probably for similar reasons, where it's like, oh man, it's one of these decks. I know what it's going to be. It's completely predictable, but it's just so overpowered and non-interactive that there's not much you can do about it. You just kind of have to sit there and take it. And the fact that they're taking those type of decks out of the game, or at least attempting to do so, is a really big thing that like hypes me to play the game again. Because I really hated having to like loading up a game and you see it's Kingdom of Shadows and you just like die inside, because you don't want to just quit out, but you also want to quit out because you know what the game's going to be. Like, even if you manage to win it, it's not going to be fun. It's just going to be really boring. So luckily, that hopefully is not as much of a factor now. And this is good because what they also did, this new version, while you control no in-faction characters, increase the cost to marshal your cards into shadows by 1. So now they have actually put the reversed incentive in place, where you now have a really strong incentive to have at least some in-faction characters on the board marshaled normally, or else you're going to be paying a huge tax of extra gold to ever put anything into shadows, which is really unacceptable. Like, it's not going to be viable to just try and ignore that and still only play shadows cards, and all of them cost 3 to be marshaled into shadows, because they took away the old version of this agenda. Like, the first card you marshal into shadows, you could marshal it for free, I think. That's not on here anymore. That's not going to be a thing. If you're going to use this agenda, you're going to have to build your deck to account for that penalty there, where if you have an empty board, you're not marshaling any characters normally, then the cost goes up. That's not going to work. So you're going to have to take that into account. It should make it addresses both the problems I said. The Kingdom of Shadows decks now, they'll be more diverse. Like, every faction's Kingdom of Shadows deck will look more different. because they're having to use different pools of in-faction characters to get around that. And it incentivizes you to not only have shadow cards in your deck. It's like you're going to have to think of the type of deck that I prefer to try and play with shadows, where you have like this package of shadow cards that's supporting the rest of your deck instead of the deck only being shadow stuff. That's nice. Sea of Blood, again, extremely hated card. Almost right away after it came out, I knew it was going to be a problem. It ended up being a problem. It was a really dumb card. And I probably, over the course of my time playing, thought of 4 or 5 different ways to try and rebalance this. I never thought of the fix that they came up with, which is better than anything I had in mind. It's just you cannot include neutral events. Boom, done, problem solved. Not an issue anymore. No more put to the torch, no more put to the sword. They also nerfed it in the sense that the previous mechanic was you would just stack the blood tokens onto the agenda, and then all your events would permanently be free and cost 0. Which that's not as big an issue as the fact that they've removed put to the torch and put to the sword. But I do agree with it. Like, I'm not sure why it worked that way. It was very weird. Now, not only when you activate it, you will not get the discount immediately because you will not have an action window to discard the blood token until later in the turn. Every time that you want to discount the cost of the event by 2, you have to discard the blood token. So it doesn't just sit there permanently and, oh man, because you won one challenge, now all your events are free for the rest of the game. You have to actually keep winning challenges if you want to keep getting the 2 gold discount. And as they say, this will lead to unique decks for each faction, as opposed to, I mean, it's not the case that all the decks look the same for every faction with Sea of Blood, to the same extent as Kingdom of Shadows or Free Folk, but they all felt the same, because they were all just whatever the biggest military icons are. Oh man, I got put to the torch and put to the sword through, you lose. That's no longer a thing. That's great. I would actually look forward to building decks with this agenda now. Free Folk, very similar situation, as they point out, hated by many for its straightforward playstyle and uniformity. Now, all it does is you kneel your faction card to raise your claim by 1. So you can still get 3 military claim with this, but you're only just going to get that 3 military claim once. And more importantly, if the opponent doesn't want to get hit by 3 claim military, they just have to worry about defending the military challenge, and then they're going to be able to keep their board. The problem with the old version of this is even if you block military, then if they push through intrigue or power, they'll just use the agenda and you still have to fulfill 2 military claim. And that would still end up killing you and wearing you down. It was like too difficult to block it because any challenge that they got through, they could kneel the agenda to apply an additional 2 intrigue or military claim. Now this way you can focus on just defending 1 challenge, and if you pull that off, you'll be safe. So it makes it a lot more possible to play against it. Wars to Come, I don't know if this was overpowered. This was always like I was skeptical about this being put on the restricted list, but there was an obvious issue at the time that like every single deck was a Wars to Come deck, and they all started to look the same, and that's really boring. So it's fine that they, redesigned this, and it's not going to be on the restricted list anymore. So the change that they made, I think, is now your non-war plot cards gain prized 1. So if you can't just make a good stuff Wars to Come deck anymore. I mean, you can. I don't think that's really going to be worth it because you're going to be giving your opponent, like, how much free power? At least 3 or 4, probably, off of that. And just giving people 3 or 4 free, power for free, I think is not going to be acceptable in exchange for the benefit of getting the extra plots. You're going to have to use this with war plots. Now, is a war plot deck with this agenda ever going to be viable? I don't know. We'll find out, I guess. Again, they promise that they're going to bring more war synergy. Maybe it'll be more viable when they release a bunch of good war plots. We'll find out. Valyrian Steel, what did they do here? Yeah, I wanted this video to be shorter. It's not going to be that much shorter. This is still going to be over an hour. But I don't know. Maybe it's under an hour and a half. We'll find out. Kneel your faction card. I think the change now is they made it limit once per phase, and it used to be 3 times per round. I think that's the only change here, which means it's still going to be easy to use it twice per round because you can use it once in marshalling and then use it once in any other phase with the action. Is that really all they did? deck cannot. That's probably still there. Huh. They took out by title. Does that do anything? I don't know. Yeah, all they did is they changed it from 3 times per round to once per phase. So theoretically now you could actually use it more times in a round if you could manage to use it in 4 phases, which would be very difficult. You'd have to use shadow attachments or something like that. But I don't, and they say that the winner of the playtest tournament was still using this agenda. That doesn't surprise me because this does not feel like that big of a nerf. It's like, all right, well, you're still going to use it twice per round guaranteed, compared to just being 3 times per round before. And, it's not going to take that many shenanigans to get that one extra trigger. I guess I don't know how many attachments there are with ways to interplay in weird phases, but definitely you can think about, putting attachments that have ambush in your deck. Then you can use it 3 times per round still pretty easily. Marshalling phase, ambush, and challenges. And then, use the action in, dominance or something. But again, I don't know if this agenda was ever that overpowered to start with. I never felt like it was the worst thing ever when I had to play against it. It was definitely strong, but it wasn't one of those things where I would just see it and just dread having to play against it. With the possible exception of Jon Snow. I really hate Jon Snow. But the problem with Jon Snow, usually, is this a banner? It's not a banner, right? I can't remember what the other one was that was a banner, but this wasn't. The problem with Jon Snow more often is Queensguard, and you can't use Jon Snow Queensguard with this, so that's not as big a deal. Breaking Ties, this card was effectively soft banned when it was put on the restricted list, which was necessary at the time. Now it's way less powerful because you have to shuffle a standing loyal character into your deck. I think previously it was Sacrifice. That's not really that big of a change, except that it removes Flea Bottom, but okay, it doesn't work with Flea Bottom. It's not the end of the world. So first of all, they have to be standing, and you can only do it once per round because the X times per round is the number of opponents you have. Previously, it was twice per round. So that is a big decrease in power, but I do expect that most attrition decks will probably still use this plot. And a lot of general decks, just if your faction has good characters that are loyal and it costs 1 or 2, you can consider splashing one of these into probably pretty much any deck. Any Night's Watch deck, it's going to be worth a consideration because you're going to shuffle your Messenger Raven back into your deck to return their Randall Tarley to their hand. That's still really, really powerful. Even if it's just limit once per round, that's going to be something that people have to watch out for now. Yeah, and Martel is definitely going to have this plot in probably every Martel deck because I think the Green Blood Traders are loyal. Yeah, I'm 90% sure that they are. And that's a card you want to shuffle back into your deck. You want to draw that card again. So that's good. Forced March, this was a plot that was in every deck, and it was too stupid. Now you have to choose how many characters you're going to kneel up front, and probably more importantly, you have to kneel the same amount of characters as the opponent. Previously, they would have to kneel 1 extra character than you. So you would just reveal this, and in any situation, it would give you a board advantage, pretty much. It would have to be... It's only if they don't have any relevant military icons at all would the plot not be good. And obviously, that's rare enough that it was just in every deck. Now it's more fair because you can still kneel out their board, but your board will also be knelt out if you do that. There are still decks where you can imagine using it. If you have a weenie deck and you want to punish big guy decks, this can potentially be worth it. You could use it in stall decks and lame out decks to make people waste their turns while you marshal locations and stuff like that. I think it's still usable, but it's not as busted as it was before. And I think it did not used to be plot deck limit 1. Am I right? Yeah, the previous version was not plot deck limit 1, so you could do it twice, which was really dumb. Because, 2 turns, this would get played and it would shut everything down. Now you can only do it once. Littlefinger's Meddling, this was a combo card, fixed by giving it a limit. Everything needs a limit. It used to reduce the cost of all events by 2. Now it's just the first event each phase by 2. So potentially still a plot that will be used in event-focused decks like Sea of Blood or, what's that agenda? The new one, Dark Wings, Dark Words. Maybe you'll play this, but no longer a combo card. That's fine. At the Palace of Sorrows, this is a powerful card. As they point out, it warps the game. It warps the current meta. Was it broken? I don't know if it was too powerful, but it messes with the game enough and changes how it works on a fundamental level to an extent that I think the nerf of making it plot deck limit 1 is fine. Only being able to do this once and then you have to play the game normally again, that's okay. You know, most plots that have an effect that's on this level where it just totally changes how the game works for a turn, they tend to be plot deck limit 1. You know, resets and things like that, so this is okay. Return to the Fields was nerfed because now, first of all, again, they added plot deck limit 1. It used to be you could have 2 of these, and I remember that. That was obnoxious because I could have, you know, my Stark deck that has a million weenies, and I could reveal this twice. And, you know, by the time the opponent gets past the Return to the Fields and can safely play their reset, it's too late. You know, I've already won at that point because I was able to stall for 2 turns with 2 of these. That was too strong. Also, it no longer gives gold. It used to give you a gold for each character you sacrifice, which is a big deal. This will still be a good like counterplay to resets in a lot of cases, but it's not as overpowering because you're not going to be getting like 7 gold so that you can instantly reflood the board. It'll be like more of a slower recovery in that case. So I think these are good changes to the card because I do like having an answer for resets. I think, you know, having the control decks that can just blindly play Valar whenever they want and normal decks get screwed over and there's not much they can do about it. I like having a plot that you can counterplay against that, but I do agree that the old version of the plot, especially the fact that you could have 2 of them, was too good. Annals, this was a combo card again because combo decks would use it to play 50 events out of their discard. Now it has a limit, twice per phase. Everything needs a limit. This was given a limit. It's now fixed. King in the North, don't understand why it wasn't this way to begin with. As they point out, I mean, even the guy that designed it wanted it to be like the plot from first edition that actually shut down all the triggered abilities in a fair way, like even-handed. The original version of this plot was so dumb and so unfun and like warped the game so much. It was just, oh man, I happen to marshal a king character, now I flip this plot and I win. It wasn't quite that bad. I mean, obviously you would have games where the opponent would do that and you'd still be able to win, but it was just so obnoxious and overpowered. Like, I don't understand why that was ever really allowed. Now it's fair and it actually makes more sense because if you play it, you can still use it to take a crap on decks that are relying too much on their triggered abilities. Like, this is still going to be a really strong plot against Martell, but you actually have to turn off your own abilities as well. You can no longer sit there triggering all your reducer locations even though you played this plot. The only abilities that you can use, they have to have the king or queen trait, and that's kind of a cool exception that they left in there. Makes it a little more fun. Trade routes, again, obviously a card that had to be restricted because you could be getting 8+ gold on turn 2 pretty easily with this plot. It was way too much gold. Now it's, instead of getting a gold for each location that you and the opponent control, you choose a player and you only gain 1 gold for how many locations they have. So first of all, just the sheer ability to generate gold has been cut way down, but then on top of that, you have to build your deck around this plot if you're going to use it. So location heavy decks might still want to have 1 copy of this, because like in the late game where you have more than 5 locations out, then you can still potentially get 8 or more gold out of it. But it won't ramp up to that huge amount nearly as fast as it did before, and you're going to have to build your deck around it in a certain way for it to be reliable. So that makes it a lot better. I remember previously, and you know, I've been playing these aloof and apart. That's a new agenda. I've been playing with that agenda a bit, and I remember, like, when I was playing the game before, the objective of my plot deck a lot of times would just be to give me enough gold and draw that I can get all my cards and marshal all of them. And trade routes made that too easy to do. I do like there being more of a limit on how much gold you can easily generate with your plots, so that you have to think more about being efficient with what their effects actually do, instead of just playing them because they basically have high stats on them. Now, I'm a creature of habit. I'm still doing that with these aloof and apart decks. I still have 2 copies of A Noble Cause in there, because of course I do. I mean, that's one of my standbys. I've always played that plot a ton. It's still basically a 7 gold plot, and it's like, oh, the fact that it's 7 gold still outweighs a ton of other things. So we'll see how that works out. But I do think, you know, again, this used to be a economy plot that could just fuel any deck, and that was an issue with it, is it wasn't very conditional. Now there's definitely going to be decks where, like, I'm not going to just have a huge econ plot that I can easily slap 2 of in it without thinking about it. I might have to make some more relevant plot deck decisions. I don't mind that. So this video has probably gone on for way too long. I really hope there's not any of that static crackling feedback. I don't know what I'm going to do if another video gets ruined by that. Or maybe I'll just have to buy a new mic or something at that point. We'll see what happens. But yeah, assuming that this video is good and then it goes up, I'm going to review the new cards next. That's going to include the 4 agendas from the bin pack, as it's called, which were legal and are interesting, plus the new cards that they've done. They're calling it Forgotten Heroes. It's like the new set that they made, which I like the look of these. These are interesting. We'll be going over those in another video. But this one's definitely gone on for too long.